Hey everybody, it's Mick Liubinskas here from Climate Salad. As you know, we love talking about anything that can help the world get to a climate positive state. And one of the biggest conversations we've been having over the last couple of months has been this enormous surge in artificial intelligence and the fact that it has an incredibly big impact on the environment negatively, but also can have a big impact positively. Someone I've had about 100 conversations with this is Mark Pesce, and Mark's joining me today to have a bit of a chat so we can, in the next 43 minutes, completely solve all our problems. Mark, great to have you.
Thank you, and we'll do our best.
It's a very, very big topic, and we're going to, as two seasoned ranters, we're going to go down some rabbit holes, trip over a few times, meander a lot. But yeah, looking forward to the conversation. And Mark, obviously, you've been on the tools in AI,
Yeah, yeah.
and part of the question is, I think, is people are sitting on the outside going, okay, other than GPT rewriting Bohemian Rhapsody for my grandmother's birthday card, like what are the actual tools and fundamentals of AI? Because one of the big questions is, can we actually use AI to make AI more efficient so that it doesn't chew up so much water and energy? But maybe here we are at the end of September. Maybe it'd be great just get a check in with you, the exponential growth of AI, like where and the trillion dollar platforms and all the money going into it. Can you give us a snapshot of where are we?
Okay, so I think in terms of the Gartner hype cycle, if people are familiar with that curve, we've kind of sailed off the top of the curve into unexplored regions right now. There is what can only be called stupid money, chasing something, and you can't say it doesn't exist, but it's going to have pretty profound returns. So there's overshoot. That's pretty typical of a new tech thing, right? I saw the overshoot back when the web happened. I saw the overshoot back when the internet happened, right? This is kind of how this stuff works.
Yeah.
So overshoot is not it's pretty common here. The overshoot that we're seeing now, because it requires so much physical infrastructure, and because that physical infrastructure burns so much electricity, because it's all using late generation semiconductors that are very efficient, but we're talking about a single chip having 100 billion transistors on them, and every one of those transistors is using a small amount of power. You multiply anything by 100 billion, it's a lot. And then you have 100,000 of those inside of a data center or more. We had more than enough data center power 3 years ago, right? We were building them, but now it's kind of, as you point out, it's kind of gone exponential with Meta and
Yeah.
Oracle, which is now, Larry Ellison is now the second most valuable person on the planet somehow, because he's got a deal to build $500 billion of data centers with OpenAI and NVIDIA.
Yeah.
That's a US project. You see more and more of this build out happening. We do, in fact, the funny thing is that although interest in various kinds of AI is kind of coming and going and waning and all of this, we actually see that the trend for people using it is still increasing. It's
Yeah.
rolling out. To sort of step back for a moment, in my own research, which I look at not just as someone who's on the tools, but as someone who's looking at the culture of the people who are using these tools, what we're starting to see is almost what we would call ambient AI use. So if you have either a teenager or maybe someone who's in uni in the house, take a look at whether the ChatGPT window is just open. And they're not in it every minute, but they're in it consistently. They're getting a little help with this or asking a question about this. Sometimes they're using it as a tutor. Sometimes they're using it as a search engine. But it's what we would call ambient usage. And it's very similar to the way people dealt with television 20, 25 years ago. It was just on in the background, and maybe they'd check in on it, but they didn't have to watch it.
Mm.
If you have, as OpenAI wants, say 2 billion of the most affluent people on the planet, all piped into ChatGPT all at once, if that's not really efficient in terms of its use of power to be able to generate a result to a question you're putting to it, times 2 billion people, then we're going to need so much more power and infrastructure to be able to do that, that it is extremely worrying. I mean, already we've seen a move toward revivifying nuclear power which, maybe in Canada that makes sense. In Australia, it's literally crazy talk because we have so much sunlight. It's just why would you do it? But they are doing that because they have such a demand for power, and no one really wants to build more coal-fired power plants. Even in China, India is about the only place because they really don't have a lot of other infrastructure that really is trying to build this out. But anywhere that you're building a lot of data centers, you need a lot of cooling. Now, there's some interesting innovations in that. And you need huge amounts of power to be able to do that. And so the question then is, if we are going to be doing that, how do we optimize this for efficiency? Now, the good news is that since the very first version of ChatGPT came out, which is just a little under 3 years from now, and oh my God, a lot has happened in 3 years, getting an answer, inferencing an answer is dramatically more efficient. And it's probably somewhere between 100 and 500 times more efficient than it was back then. But there's probably 100,000 times more users than there was back then. So some of your efficiency is being eaten up on the fact that it's scaling at a level and at a technology level that we've never seen before. So how do we balance this? Now, the great thing is because the US and China are having this little trade war right now.
Just a touch.
And just a touch. And America's doing everything to make sure that China can't get great NVIDIA chips, right? And China's like, well, it made them really crafty because it turns out, and I realized this when we saw DeepSeek, which landed in December last year and blew everyone away. It isn't he with the best toys who wins. It's he who can use those toys best. And so DeepSeek was trained and is inferenced for much lower power requirements than, say, OpenAI or Anthropic or Google would use to train a model. And when we talk about AI, we have to sort of separate this, the modern AI, into two stages. We train a model, and training a model takes 6 months of an entire data center, maybe multiple data centers, grunging 24 hours a day, going through the training of the 10 trillion different words and facts and images that get fed into this model, grinding over it again and again and again and again until the models start to put out something that starts to make sense. And then once that's done and it's good enough, then you can let people chat with it. That's inferencing. Now, inferencing is not as power intensive for a single person. But again, you've got to multiply that by the fact that OpenAI has on the order of 500 million users now who are using it some of the time. And so all very quickly run aground in those numbers. So these are the numbers that we're looking at. They're big numbers. They're sudden numbers. And in order to satisfy the market demand, we're now starting to say, well, we're going to have to do things like build power plants and all of these other things to be able to do that. Does that make sense? My feeling is if you can't do this efficiently, you can have great AI and you'll have a burnt planet, and that is not a good trade-off. And I don't think people are really, they're making some hand-wavy gestures about it, but I don't really think anyone's made that front and center, that in fact efficiency is probably the most important thing. Right now we're getting efficiency gains just because that's happening. But there's no directed effort to really, really make AI as efficient as it could be. I want to actually just see AI not so running in a data center, but running on your smartphone and running on your PC. And I've been doing that since the beginning with some of the models that have come out from Meta and now from Alibaba and from DeepSeek. There's lots of ways of running it relatively efficiently locally. They're not quite as good as the big models, but they will be. And when they are, then do we need those great big data centers?
Yeah, I think so much of this actually depends on how it evolves, and we are even though people like yourself and many others have been working on AI for 20 years, it always seems like it just emerges out of absolute nowhere for the average person. And for in terms of actual practical usage, it's really 3 years ago is when it was like it went from being kind of useless to useful pretty quickly. But we're in the very early days, and what I keep going around in my head and not getting a very good answer on is the interplay between Wright's law, Moore's law, Jevons paradox,
Yeah.
just in AI, let alone energy and climate. Because as you said, 3 years in, of course, it's not going to be optimized. It's going to be terribly messy. But as you said, every bit of there's Wright's law, which is as we scale it up massively, the cost should come down exponentially. But then also as things become cheaper, Jevons paradox says that everyone uses it more.
Yeah.
And then you have Moore's law applied because Nvidia didn't. They were a gaming company, right? They were making
Yes.
gaming processing units and
Yeah.
graphic processing units, and they all kind of lucked onto this thing of like the fact that AI. So they aren't optimizing them, and as you said, data centers have never. What sorry, they have cared about energy and water because they've needed some, but now they're like to put a data center, like your very first conversation is power and water, like, and hopefully as regulation goes up because of everyone understanding the climate problems, they have to do that with a view of, not like Meta has really, which is nuclear. And again, I agree, it doesn't make sense in Australia, but finding an old nuclear power plant, turning it on to run your power center is better than running 10 coal-fired power plants, but like marginally so. So we're just in the middle of these two mega trends, like totally running into each other, and you've got like so many variables at play,
Yeah.
and we're kind of hoping that the a good outcome happens, because certainly there's no putting AI back and going, whoa, well, let's just grow slowly over 20 years. It's going to grow at even faster rates, because you think about when the iPhone first came out, the platform, the app development platform was like touched on, and then 5 years later it was like 10 times bigger than the iPhone. The same thing's going to happen. Like I was telling someone last night, we're at the filmed plays stage of AI. Like when movies first came out, they used to film plays. I think we're at the just barely using it as it is. We haven't built a platform for it. As you said, it's not on phones. So it has to get more efficient really fast. Otherwise, it's actually going to run out of energy and water. Like it's probably going to cause a crisis much faster. And then people, all this money, they're almost going to be forced to solve it. So maybe even like AI's growth is possibly the best thing for climate change, because the 2050 year goal of avoiding 2 degrees doesn't compute to the average person, but the average billionaire, Larry Ellison's going to be like, I need to roll out data centers. Oh, we need water and we need power. It needs to be really efficient and it needs to be good for the environment. No problems. Like here's $1 billion. Go and fix it.
Yeah. I think you talk about we're going to be running into a climate wall. I'm pretty sure that as soon as people started raising the specter of nuclear, that was a sign that we'd actually already hit the wall, and people were now just groping around for a solution. It is surprising to me, as a proud Australian, the sunniest nation in the world, because the middle of the country is all just a vast desert, that we aren't actually populating some parts of the sunnier parts of this country with data centers, because you can make all of the power there, use all the power there, and you don't have to ship the power anywhere. The only thing you're shipping out is a fiber optic cable, right? So that in terms of the economics of it, it feels like that is a no-brainer. The only thing you have to worry about is that there's some ping delay between various parts of the world. But for Southeast Asia, we're very well placed. Why people aren't taking that path rather than saying we're going to go wake up a 20-year-old decommissioned nuclear reactor? Because what could possibly go wrong with that?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
That it feels like in some way.
Yeah, I love this
here we
photo.
are.
It shows how much solar we need to power the entire world. And you're like,
Yeah.
Where is it? Yeah, it's just those little
Yeah.
red squares. Like it's just
It's that tiny little square in Western Australia. Exactly.
yeah.
You know,
And people are
probably.
like, oh, it's going to be used too much land. You're like,
Yeah.
what, have you seen what fracking does to land? Yeah.
Well, there's that, and there's also, of course, the beautiful work that's happened, I think, in Western New South Wales, where the sheep are grazing underneath the panels because it turns out they actually like getting shade during the day, which no one really knew because they never had shade. And now the sheep are all like very happily, and the grass grows well under there because it's not getting too much sunlight. So there's all these different ways of thinking about how renewables work very well with AI if we make those decisions. It feels like the thing that's needed there then is, it's probably not a public-private partnership, but a large enough capital pool to be able to spread the risk around the generation in the same way that, say, a Meta or a Google would spread the risk around a new facility for compute.
So yeah, that's interesting. So that's interesting. This combination of humanity's need to get the world back to being nature positive, and then and market forces, and that's what the it is really interesting that I don't think Mark Zuckerberg's sitting there going, I really, really, really want massive data centers doing AI, but I tell you, they have to be good for the environment. Yeah, they're not driven by that. They have to be driven by the other mechanisms. But I think that the view is certainly that solar, like looking at even the Saudi Arabian solar deals, and like it is very clearly the solar and wind are very clearly the cheapest source of renewables, and they are still not at full efficiency. Like
Yeah.
we've got room to grow there. So I think coal is definitely on the decline, and I agree. If you had a bunch of nuclear already in place, you wouldn't turn it off. Other than modular nuclear fusion, you're not going to be able to roll it out.
I have to tell you, I had a conversation with a very esteemed lawyer about 2 months ago. It was a lunchtime conversation, and I was like, wow, we really do need new data centers, because she had remarked to me, because she does a lot of work with the investors, that basically the only deal flow she was seeing was AI companies. I was like, well, we're going to need more data centers for all of that. She's like, you're absolutely right. In Victoria, we can co-locate them on gas fracking and burn the gas right there. And she was really excited. And I was like, why wouldn't we use solar for this? And she looked at me, and you could see this kind of calculus going on. Well, she just said, but that won't work. And I was not prepared to kind of lay out the actual economics and the engineering on why that would absolutely work. Because she just turned to me and said, no, 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 no. Drill, baby, drill. That
Yeah,
there is, I think, a broader perception that the only way to get fast energy,
yeah,
that in some ways, climate safe energy is not seen as being as good, as
yeah,
useful, as capable of work. Sure, you can use it at home,
yeah,
but at industrial scale,
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I get it. Like it's a really complicated thing, and it hasn't been helped by massive m money being put into disinformation. Like that's there's no doubt that that has happened, and it's like really clear and totally admitted. But and my view is actually that, and what I say to climate tech entrepreneurs is, you have to go and solve it with that in play. Like you are all the social capital of all the people trying to do the best cannot compete with $7 trillion worth of fossil fuel companies who are defending their assets. Um, it's why I said actually that the Australian target, even though some people wanted it to be much more aggressive, I said the more aggressive it is, the more defensive the industry, and the more those people like that say that's going to come at a cost. Whereas what we just need to do is to actually go and create. We need to go and create the products that are better. And they also happen to have to be better for the environment, and that's what solar and wind has done. So I think again, sure, it might be easy to go back to those things that we already know, like coal fire and fracking, but um, they are diminishing. Like anybody who knows the numbers, like they are absolutely diminishing. They're going backwards. They will not
yeah.
be the solution long term. And we're just in the middle of this mess, and we need to step to the other side. So partly it's
And,
having the faith and patience, partly it's pushing when we can.
and there's that beautiful line from Gandhi: first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. And we're in the then they fight you stage, which means actually we're kind of close to winning.
I think that's exactly right. I was surfing with a really good friend of mine, and complaining about all the uphill battles I've got at the moment, and he was grinning away and grinning away, and it was like, he said, "Why do you think they're fighting back so hard?" I'm like, because they don't want it to happen. I said, "No, because they think it will happen."
Yeah.
Like they are
Yeah.
getting more and more defensive. It's like back in you and I in the internet days when we're like, "This is amazing," and every big company was like, "It's a fad. Like there are 10 people
Yeah.
using it. That'll never amount to anything. It's a hoax."
Exactly.
It's almost exactly the same, right? And then they were like, "What? Had to close down all our Blockbuster stores because of a company that sends DVDs to people's homes just disrupted us." So, but look, I think a big difference though is, I don't think we get the world back to a climate positive state by completely disrupting the fossil fuel industry. I think they have to transition and actually data centers and AI is a really good example of a good answer to say you can continue to provide grid scale power,
Yeah.
and you can do it on location. Like that's actually better for you. You don't need this transmission all around the world. Now we need transmission. There's no doubt, but actually there's value for your $7 trillion of assets. Like I think if we don't take a judo approach, which is
Yeah. Yeah.
take it and work with it. If we are purely only fighting back without a way for them to participate, if it's us versus them, then I think it becomes harder.
And having done enough consulting work with the power companies in this country, they actually understand that their generation plants are well located to be distribution points for renewable energy. And so sometimes it's really around simply figuring out how those systems work and adapting to them. I mean, one, of course, the big issues in Australia now is that it's very difficult to build new power lines across grazier's land and things like that. They simply don't want them, and they're resisting. And there's some people who want them, but it's quite uneven. It's costing the Commonwealth a lot of money. So what did the Commonwealth do? It says, okay, we're going to give everyone battery rebates because it distributes the power load. And so it's another way of providing exactly the same resource, which is electrons on demand, right? That's what power is, but through a different mechanism. And so it does feel like you're right. The climate approach is to be flexible, it's to be pliable, and to be someone who can be worked with rather than someone who's being arrogant, like, oh, you're out of business.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really. I think there's it's one of the things I keep saying to people. Like I used to be a bit pessimistic, then I became optimistic, and now I'm certain we're going to get there. There's just a question of timing, and the batteries are like looking at hydrogen. And seeing what it could have been, there's no doubt that I think batteries are the modular energy source that's going to change certainly residential and small commercial.
So let me tell you, there was a breakthrough from Japan, which has gone all in hydrogen storage that was just announced. All right, so an actual proper breakthrough. We'll see, because I think they need to scale it a bit, but it looks like this is the kind of thing, because effectively the Japanese research community has been working very hard on hydrogen as everyone's sort of bounded along into, basically lithium as a storage medium rather than hydrogen. I have always been very skeptical about hydrogen because hydrogen's always been cryogenic. And cryogenic hydrogen, because of quantum level effects, simply leaks out of it. It doesn't matter what container you put it in. The proton's on one side of the barrier, and then it's on the other side of the barrier, and you get no control over that. That is the role of the quantum dice. And so all cryogenic hydrogen leaks at what I think around 10% per container per day. It's quite substantial.
Huge, yeah.
And I was talking to folks who actually use that when they were going to hydrogen power ships that were transporting hydrogen across the ocean. They were going to capture the stuff and then use that to power the ship.
Yeah.
But it's a really hard medium to work with. And I feel like we haven't, as much as I thought hydrogen was a dead end, I think maybe it is not. It's just got a long way to go.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think I think there's exponential growth on a couple of curves, and some of these things happen gradually, then suddenly. And I think that there's no doubt we've had inbound inquiries from Japan over the last year around batteries and other kind of storage, like looking at MGA Thermal or Sakona, Capricorn Power, and saying, okay, hydrogen's not going to solve all of our problems. But there's still a maybe $100 billion going into hydrogen, so I think it's going to find a role somewhere. I think EVs is 99% likely to be batteries because it's just so modular, and the efficiency that's coming out in terms of charging vehicle to grid, like it's just a game changer. And I think the same, like I think again seeing some more mid-market energy sources like waste to energy, hydrogen like might play a role there if it goes and solves it. And I'm agnostic. Like I'm even like if modular nuclear fusion can come in and play a role and it's safe enough, then fine. But I think and I think hydrogen will play a portion of the role. It's not as big as everybody thought. Certainly, Australian government went all in on it. And I get it in terms of looking at the value and capturing it, and we didn't capture as much on solar as we could have back in all the great work at UNSW did. And if you look at solar, wind, and batteries, like and EVs, like certainly batteries in EVs is looking like China's going to take a big chunk of that value, but and Australia can still play good roles in that, I think. So yeah, I think that's and I think in terms of AI and data centers as well, you've got massive requirements, and you've got locations that have to be around the world. You can't have a single data center that runs the whole world. Like
No.
you've got to have them spread. So there is this. Yeah, there are some things around AI which are like, you might make all your GPUs in a certain spot and ship them around the world, but power and processing has actually got to be a bit more spread. And as you said, game changers of putting it on your phone and having it modular, like looking at I was telling someone the other day, like we used to actually look at every single new computer that came out and was like, this one is 10 megahertz faster and this one is 10 megahertz, like this is the Pentium. And then at some point it was just became so fast that I have no idea the speed of my computer now, like it's what it
Yeah.
does. And AI, we're going to track it really, really clearly. And at some point it'll become so efficient we won't care. We'll just use it every day.
Yeah. And let me give you a bit of a vision for what that means in terms of climate. So I was a very early subscriber to Amber Electric, right? And it's made me quite aware of how I use my power now, right? Like I don't have solar panels on my house, so I'm really just a consumer, but it allows me to track my energy consumption, it allows me to let me know when the price is spiking so I can use less electricity, all of those sorts of things. But the thing to think about is that they have an API, and I have actually built apps using their API so I can pull data from it and learn all sorts of things about the current price, and realized I could flip a relay that would charge a battery at home when the grid price was low enough and then use that to power that. I could make gadgets like that at scale could actually have real impacts. Okay, so that's kind of part of the equation. There's a data there. But now let's map that out against all of the other things that I do in my life. If I have a really well-trained AI, which is not quite a generative AI, it's probably more of a hybrid between a whole bunch of really nice code and some AI, and who knows, then actually as I move through my day, that system is aware of this and is optimizing my energy usage everywhere that I go because it kind of knows and it can anticipate. I feel like that's not a science fiction thing. That's really just an engineering problem, right? And there have been people working on bits of this, and we're going to start to see that, I think, become more coherent. And if you have that running on the AI in your pocket, the low energy AI in your pocket, then that AI is definitely saving you more energy than the AI is consuming.
Yeah.
And that ends up being a personal win, but then you scale that up to a household, to a business,
Yeah.
to a factory. And it may very well be that it comes in from the outside because the factory needs to save the energy more than I do as a person.
Yeah.
But there are a lot more people than there are factories.
Yeah. 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 I think that it's one comfort I've actually got to in terms of climate and AI is there are multiple parts of it where of the challenge which I think would take 10 years without AI. And there's some really big chunks that I'd love to get your feedback on it. There's really basic ones. Like one thing at the moment, I've been working with a couple of entrepreneurs, a couple of engineers, building a platform to help middle managers who are being told they need to do sustainability, climate positive projects, and they've got no idea on the basis of how to evaluate that. They've never done it before, and they can't put their data in ChatGPT. So we're creating sort of a private platform. But even just being able to go and say, what is Scope 3? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and what does Scope 3 mean for me? And of course you could Google it, but the difference now of the complexity of like, I'm in this role, in this logistics role, and actually, what's the regulation here? But I sell products internationally. What are the you can quickly get to shutdown mode because the complexity is so high, but AI can help you through that. Then I think you have really obvious things like the efficiency and optimization. So we've got companies in Climate Salad who are using AI for HVAC optimization. How many people are in a room? How many people came into the building? And some of it's like tracking where people are going, but sometimes it's just like how many people walked in the door? What's the temperature today? Where's the sun? And like these are complicated things. And previously we just said blast the air conditioning out until someone complains because energy's so cheap and who cares? Now we care and we're asking the question and we're like, oh, through AI and through some sensors, we can actually manage it. Everyone's comfortable, less energy, less emissions. Like everybody wins. And I think there's hundreds of examples of that. And then there's another level of actually really, really complex things like what's the battery chemistry or how do we make an algae which is just incredibly efficient with photosynthesis that can actually capture carbon and do it in these locations around the world. Like so because we have to sequester a whole bunch of carbon, we can't just turn off the tap. We've got to soak up some of the water on the floor. So, I think AI is going to accelerate those things, whereas I think without them, I think we would really struggle. So I think there is so many different applications of AI which are not just positive but necessary.
And we're just starting to see. So Google DeepMind, the first thing that they kind of did was AlphaFold, right? Which is protein folding, which is great. Human biology, human disease, fantastic. They got a Nobel Prize for it, right? So it's kind of like, there you go, you got the gong. Where we're now going to start to see that go, and we actually already are, is material science, right? So how do you put different molecules together in particular configurations to give you particular qualities? If I hadn't gone into computers the way that I did, I probably would have become a material scientist because it's kind of one of those things that I really enjoy even just reading about. Because pretty much everything you touch in the human world is a material. We've been making materials since we started
Yeah.
weaving fabric and baking clay, right? Material science is essential to what we do as a species. It's just now with AI, we now have new laboratories and new tools for helping us to explore problem spaces. And there's this lovely statement out of MIT, which is the place that I went to school and was first sensitized to material science. Lovely statement out of MIT last week. It's like, we don't need 10 million new materials. We need one new material that changes everything. Right? And
Yeah,
it
well,
feels like they're just getting the tools that they need to be able to find that one material that's super efficient or super durable or whatever it is.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think we are already doing massive positive work on that front. Like, I think one of the great examples here in Australia, and is exactly as you're talking about it, MGA Thermal out
MGA
of
Thermal, love those guys.
Newcastle
Yeah,
University. And I'll be
yeah,
honest, we're a tiny investor in them, but it's partly just because it's like alchemy, right? They've created an energy brick which
yeah.
can be like this brick can be heated up like coal in industrial furnaces and or power generation. And it cools down and then you can reuse it tomorrow. Like it's low emission reusable coal.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, like to your point around the person saying, oh, we'll just put it next to some fracking. Like I think the possibilities are so crazy with algae and material science and all the different opportunities that you just have to go and develop and then normalize it. Like I think you have to roll like and we're still early in that. Like most even NGA Thermal, even though it produces that result, it's got to work in the industry. It's not like cool. Yesterday I was buying coal, now I'm buying NGA Thermal. Like that would be a great outcome, but everything takes time. It has to be optimized. You have to build a product around the product. So like again, what we can do in a lab, we need to get out to the real world, and that takes process. So
The other side of that, and this is something I think because our backgrounds are in computing technology, which for our entire careers has been very rapid in evolution, and industrial applications at scale, whether that's making steel or whatever it is, they don't actually change their plant very quickly. There's enormous resources tied up in the investment and process and all of that. And actually getting them to make process changes, process transformations requires a significant investment of time, but also that means that you need to have a very clearly defined ROI. And so those investments, the way steel was made through antiquity until you get to the Bessemer furnace, right? And then when you get the Bessemer furnace, and then I think there's a new set of furnaces that we use now, but they were huge transformations that required huge capital investments. And I think that's where we are now
mm,
with getting to industrial scale capability of using climate friendly solutions. And that seems to be like that's obviously a place where you can either have large investment funds, so whether that's national super funds like we have here, or like the Norwegians have, where they can, or the Saudis have,
yeah,
or you're going to actually just have to have state actors stepping in and going, yes, we're going to give you the $1 billion loan at a low interest rate so that you can
yeah,
completely retool.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the points of fragility and risk in this is that there is there is a gap, like as you said with the hype cycle, right? There's a bunch of people coming in. I think both in terms of climate, for like 3 or 4 years ago,
Yeah.
and now in AI. There's this massive investment, and the revenues and profits don't flow immediately from that. Like some people are seeing them, but typically the market bursts out, and then there's an adjustment and a normalization, and then we grow it out. If you think of like the dot-com boom and bust around 2000. And it wasn't really until like when we had the GFC, obviously, but it was 2012, 2014 when we started to see SaaS and e-commerce
Yeah.
normalize as just that's how everybody does it. So I think obviously, as opposed to AI, climate has a external force playing against it, which is, oh my goodness, sea levels rising, there's more storms, there's more hot days. Like it's and I think there's a policy shift to match, but not it's not so directly linked. Like COVID was like, oh my God, people are dying. Here's $1 billion. There's no COVID moment with climate. Like there's another fire, there's another storm, and that hurts us. And which means that gap of investment of $1 trillion a year, which is what is
Yeah.
required,
Yeah.
is like the market is not going to provide it. And certainly we're seeing this in Australia. We've got 12 companies valued at between 100 and $250 million, 32 companies at 50 to 100 million. And most of those companies, even though they've got revenue and products and customers lined up and the markets are growing, they are capital constrained because everyone's waiting to see is the timing now or in 10 years' time. Even though the environment needs the timing now, the pressure is that they're sitting there going, well, I don't want to be too early. You're like, do you want to die? Like, I don't,
Well,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. Money doesn't care whether you live and die,
yeah,
right?
that's
That's
it's
part of
yeah.
the problem right there.
It is like it genuinely is, and even billionaires who are trying to be supportive, and many aren't. Like I think until there is like absolutely catastrophe, and I actually think we're going to avoid most of it. It's going to be messy, and we should have started 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And
It's not going to be messy, Mick. It
it's
already is messy. I mean, I think that I keep on telling people to stop using the future tense because we are living in that future now. It is already messy. We're already seeing Australian cities regularly getting wiped out by some sort of unexpected climate thing, right?
yeah,
And cities in Europe and cities in America and cities in Asia. It's not,
yeah.
it's here. It's here.
I think that's right. That's the hard thing. And although I think again the people who rail against it are say, well, you've been complaining for 100 years, and it's funny the amount of people who say like, but yeah, you complain about the ozone layer, now it's not a problem. You're like, because we fixed it. We changed a million products. Now, sure, America benefited financially, which is why they got behind it because of DuPont. But you know what? Like
Yeah.
that's why I think the judo move again. We can't dismantle capitalism and pause AI for 20 years to solve climate. You've got to find the mechanisms that use them all.
Yes, and that's where the wisdom lies in finding the way that works, that benefits, rather than the
Yeah.
way that takes it away. Because people will always move toward benefit, and they will always avoid anything that takes it away, or even gives them the appearance.
Yeah.
And so much of that, of course, is the messaging around this. That climate to me is not, although it is a righteous argument, it can never be expressed in those terms. It always has to be expressed in there's
Yeah.
value here. And it's not
Yeah.
just value for your grandchildren having a better life, although they do get that, right?
Yeah.
But there's value here for you right now,
Yeah.
right? And if
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
can't make those arguments, then we need to go back and rethink them until we can make those arguments.
And I'd be really keen to hear your thoughts on tipping points on that side because the one really interesting thing from us has been I do a lot of work with companies, and even though I just finished my Masters of Sustainable Development, I've got 3 kids I want to provide a good planet for. Like it is my driver, but it cannot be my lead. And I spend constant time with founders taking the first 5 slides, deleting them because they're about how much
Yep.
emissions, how much waste, bad for the
Yeah.
environment. Like I take them out and I say, like, my product costs $2 million. I save you $400,000 a year in electricity costs. Like they're like, but
Yeah.
what about the emissions? They're like, maybe in the appendix. Like
Yeah.
it's a total bonus, it's a benefit, but if you can't make a better product that is actually does the job and actually either saves your money, reduces your risk significantly. Like,
Yeah.
and again, go and use AI. Go and use AI to say, okay, I want to solve problems for the environment, but how do I sell to a CFO? Like not a dollar, not a single dollar, and they won't even move, right? They won't even be like it's equal. You've got to be better. You've got to be
Yeah.
better. So and I think those tipping points are coming now where people are going, oh, okay, it's going to save me money or make me money or whatever.
And I think the tier one, tier two, tier three reporting, and tier three reporting comes along next year, right? Next financial year.
Yeah,
That those also make like that ends up being a slide that's deep in the deck. You don't necessarily lead with it, right? But
yeah.
you put in the slide, oh, and by the way, it will save you 40% on your tier three emissions, and people will go, oh, right? Because in the C-suite, they're aware this is coming and they're preparing for it.
Yeah.
I'm talking to CFOs. They're like, and one of the funny things is, of course, they didn't have and still kind of don't have good accounting tools for this, which again, opportunity for a startup to step in and really help support businesses as they start to track all of this.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
are great ways of being able to tell this story in a really positive way that doesn't start with that, because yes, starting with doom and gloom people will tune out, and it's not because they're not important. It's actually because it is important, and people have trouble because they feel you're landing them in a place where they feel powerless.
Yeah.
You have to land them in a place where they feel empowered.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to save somebody and save the planet. I'm winning.
I think so. I think we're getting closer to that. Well, we're seeing a lot of companies like tipping over from nice to have to must haves, and I think it's a combination of a lot of factors. It's like
Yeah.
definitely the problems are getting bigger. It becomes easy to regulate and put compliance around it when there's actually storms and billions of dollars being lost, like lives and property, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like they're the things, and then the other big one is risk. Like if you look at
Yeah.
insurance companies, every insurance company will tell you. Like I think about the two things in the future, superannuation funds who have to think about returns over a very long period of time, like
Yeah.
they have to factor it in. And that's again the new regulations means, as you said, level one, two, and three, every company will have to factor it in. And what we're also seeing is the boards of directors are saying, this is like is my company cash flow? Do we have enough cash flow to support the business? And, and like you can't, if you're signing off on climate risk, you have to understand it and you have to actually map it out. And that means it's flowing through to the organization. It's still gonna take 10 years, but I think that process is happening. And again,
And
I think AI helps you work through the complexity.
AICD, I did their tech governance summit, but of course, the thing that they were promoting was their environmental governance
Yeah.
sustainability summit that happened in Melbourne, I think in July,
Yeah.
because they realized the need to be able to educate boards on exactly these topics. And the boards probably didn't, because boards are mostly lawyers, because that
Lawyers and
kind of makes
accountants,
sense.
yeah.
It
Yeah.
just kind of makes sense who ends up on boards. And they wouldn't necessarily have any background in managing this. This is why we did the tech governance summit, because these people are generally not that
Yeah.
strong. Maybe they'll use a computer, but that's kind of all they understand. And yet they're being confronted with all sorts of challenges. Same thing is true in sustainability. There's an enormous opportunity to be able to educate people about how to think well in these issues. And they will not, if you do it right, then they don't need those doom and gloom slides, because they're going to be acting from a place of, oh, we need to keep these things in mind.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's really true, and I do see it coming. I think it's growing. Yeah, I think there's the policy's growing. There's more and more customers that want this product, and at some point it tips over. And I think again, my I've been talking about 2027, and it's partly because I've been through a lot of innovation cycles, and I feel like there's enough levers and pressures now which are building to the point. And the key one is the technology is getting better and better that instead of a green premium, you're getting a green benefit. And I think that actually, really interestingly, in Australia particularly, and this is one thing that we're seeing is because Australia is capital constrained, because there is some government funding but not enough venture funding and not enough customers, their teams are capital constrained, but they are actually surviving partly because of AI. Because they're able to process complicated things faster. They might have one marketing person who's also able to do business development and write proposals because they use AI. The teams are almost twice as strong for the same price. And that is actually helping. It's another level where I think AI is gonna help, particularly in Australia, because I think it's still going to be. My view is until we have three unicorns, I think the market's not going to believe that the timing's right. So we've got to go do that by brute force, and until we get there, AI is a key team member.
Yeah.
Is a key team member. Are you seeing that? Are you seeing people just using it to help run their businesses at early stages?
So the answer is yes. It is early days yet. So what we're seeing is pretty much everyone who's really close to it to use it that way has developed their own sort of bespoke way of using it. And that's actually probably makes a lot of sense because the thing about AI is that it's not actually a generic tool. I mean, yeah, people have Copilot everywhere and whatever, and it kind of that does generic stuff. But in fact, when you're talking about business operations and business process, that's tends to be unique to the business itself. And so the way you would use AI to help you with that stuff tends to be quite unique. And so we do see some smart people doing it. But that said, most people in business don't feel like they have the nous to be able to have a real go at that. They don't feel confident enough. And they often don't have the leisure to be able to do it. And so some of what we need to be able to do is give them the space that they need to be able to do that. We see the climate tech companies do it because their backs are against the wall, which
Yeah,
is an interesting place to be working from, right? I mean,
sure.
that's how it's how the Chinese got really efficient models. They had no choice. You have
Yeah,
no choice. You're going to adopt the tools. Most businesses can kind of grind on business as usual until they can't.
yeah. And in terms of, I think again, there's so much of this data, especially, and there is a fear factor people have. And then so, are you seeing people just basically trusting AI and saying, "Here's all my documents, give me an answer," or is a corporate's
Oh
going
God.
to have firewalled off,
Yeah, yeah.
walls around their data?
So the answer is thankfully no. I think with personal data, yes. ChatGPT, because it's being used as a psychotherapist by God knows how many people now, knows a lot of secrets. And I think
Yeah,
that's one level of problem. But when you actually get to the organizational level, except maybe in very small orgs who haven't really thought this through, there are really, even for orgs that barely use AI, there are really, really well defined, like do not put client data in here, do not put, So that happened relatively quickly because people became very sensitized to the business implications and to the legal implications of that data leaking out. But at the same time, that's also made these organizations somewhat hesitant because they need to be able to feel like they're going to be working in a secure environment, like what you're
yeah,
building for people who want to be able to have their own sort of climate mapping done. Until we actually get to that point, and I think the answer is there's a lot of private models. But again, if we have a lot of powerful private models, you're back to that, we need to build another 1,000 data centers problem. So how do we balance that need for privacy against the need for being able to have access to these new tools?
yeah, yeah. I think that's an interesting one. It is again. I think we're in the early days, and one actually bubble I see that I recognize I'm a part of. I'm in a climate bubble, and I'm also in a geek bubble. When before we started developing this tool, I said, well, surely everyone will just either put it in ChatGPT or create their own. And the reality is, like digital transformation, even though you and I were doing it in the late 90s, it wasn't until COVID until a lot of companies actually fully pushed the button on that stuff. So when you're within something, you overestimate how everyone else is going to adopt it. So I think there is still a path there. So I think that's going to be interesting. Do you think there's going to be a single big model winner and everyone's going to be back off the back, or is it going to be hundreds of different ones? There's going to be subsectors and focus.
There's more than one kind of model, I think is probably what we need to be clear on. There's models that can do language processing, so the large language models, but there's the language vision models, which are going to be used a lot in robotics. I suspect there will probably be sensor fusion models that will be used a lot in climate, so they can take data in from a whole bunch of sources and make decisions about this. So those are all very early days. We think about the large language models. And right now, of course, there's kind of three big ones. There's Google, there's Anthropic, and there's OpenAI, right? Those are the three super big, everyone knows about models. Those will
Yeah.
probably stay. But in all of these other areas, we're going to see new contenders. So, for example, we're talking about manufacturing. Autodesk just introduced a whole bunch of models that help people use generative AI when they're doing 3D modeling of new materials and new forms and all of this. So it feels like, again, that part
Yeah.
of the revolution is in its very early days. The large language models, yeah, it's had some time to run. It's a little bit more clear. But if you're talking about how we're using things day to day 10 years from now, there's
Mm.
going to be a lot more different use cases than we, I think, even intuit today.
Wow. And so if I'm a climate tech company, whether I'm hardware, software, or infrastructure, should I be like really investing now to build my own IP value in, or should I be leveraging off the big platforms until it gets to a certain level? Is it case by case?
Yeah, I mean, there's no clear guidance here. We actually see both things happening in industry right now. We see firms that are just trying to provide some basic infrastructure and then allowing other people to build on top of it. We see firms that are building vertically integrated stacks and then trying to own a lot of this. I think unless you're big enough and well funded enough, it almost always makes sense to build ecosystems that other people can plug into. You and I
Yeah.
are both open tech guys. We understand the value of open ecosystems. They take longer, but they're generally more resilient.
Yeah.
And I mean, if we're talking climate, then resilience got to be a focus.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I think it's got to go experiment, right? I think there are times when you can build your own thing. Certainly, my view is someone like me, I can't be a spectator. I've got to go and participate. But partly just to get my hands around it and to feel it. I will say as an old geek, I've never felt this speed. Like we've been in startup speed, which is they say 7 times faster than corporate. Like, literally Friday to Monday, and you're like, it just changed. It just went up
Yeah,
another
this
notch.
is
So road mapping in this is almost out the window because the entire context changes again and again. So it means everyone's being so agile because there's no alternative.
This is why I think the word of the year this year is vibe, right? That we're vibe coding and all of this because, in fact, when you don't, I mean, you can have the roadmap, but you have to vibe your way across the roadmap. It's like, oh, wait, that's happened. This path is opened up. And we
Yeah,
didn't think it would be open for another couple of years, so we can pursue it. But it feels like that kind of flexibility and being able to sort of sit with your gut,
yeah,
that Amazon truism that you really only need 60% of the data to make the decision
yeah,
is probably the way we're all needing to work now.
yeah. Wow. We're been ranting and raving, meandering for a long time. I want to leave you with you have a cup of coffee with someone who's not in climate and not in AI. They read an article somewhere and they say, "So is AI good for climate or bad for climate?" Like, what do you say?
I'm going to say it's scaling a lot right now and it's using a lot of resources. And I think part of what we will be learning as we scale it is how to make it a lot more efficient. And it is already a lot more efficient than it was 3 years ago. So the trend line is good. But if everyone's using AI, we're going to have to figure out how to manage that resource carefully.
Yeah, right. Someone we had an AI chat on Wednesday with about 20 people, and someone gave a really good frame referencing for me, which is like climate is 100% of a problem right now. It's a massive problem, and AI might make it 3, maybe even 5% worse. But you've still got maybe it's 105%, but it's still a big problem, and it's really complicated. So my view is, yeah, it's another cost, but it's a cost that should actually speed our ability to get to a climate positive base. Because if we started 20 years ago, maybe we'd be like, hey, we're almost there. AI made it a bit better, and we should have had the efficient data centers already, but we don't. So now I think we've got no choice but to use AI to actually affect the change.
But if we're not putting effort into making it efficient as we're doing that, then we're heading down probably a dead end. And it feels like that's the part that's missing is that, yeah, okay, we're going to scale AI. How do we make that use continually more efficient?
Yeah.
If we
But
do
won't all
that,
the other pressures force us to do that? Or you think there's still going to be a discretionary element?
I think it's more that there is so much momentum and capital behind it right now that it feels like it can jump the rails safely. That's not actually true, but I think it's going to try.
Yeah. Yeah. One company which I think is, and did a chat to them the other day, which is really interesting. They actually were working in mining to help the water that's used in mining to be cleaned up.
Yeah.
They actually pivoted directly to data centers because of this incredible need. So it's almost exactly the same product, but it uses significantly less energy to clean the water, and it can actually take salt water and put it into data centers. So this is an Australian product which basically uses an alternate, significantly more efficient mechanism. And a few things on this. it's really interesting that they've moved away from a massive industry of mining to focus on data centers because it's the bigger, more apparent market. It's an Australian company that's got this technology with global benefit. And to your point, it could actually just significantly change the game where it's like, oh wow, more better water, less energy, job done. Not job done, but like job started.
Yeah, job started, and I think that's it. It's a game of inches.
Yeah.
All of this stuff is a game of inches.
Yeah, it really well, and I think that's right. So that's why I'm a big believer in compound interest in this stuff. And I have my, it's a clunky phrase, but cumulative convergent exponential growth. I talk to people about this. Apple didn't sit there and make a single device and go, we Apple didn't build almost anything in this. They just put it together.
Yeah.
And this product is amazing because 100 technologies got better, 1% every year. And I think in climate, like, your home HVAC system gets more efficient, and then your home battery gets more efficient, and then you drive to work, and then your grid gets more efficient because transmission gets more efficient, and then your solar large scale solar arrays get more efficient. Like everything getting 1% better means that in 2035, like someone the other day is like, I looked at that target, that's impossible. We would have to have 50% of new sales of EVs. And it's like, I think you're underestimating convergent exponential growth because like I think the pressures are actually pushing in that direction. I think despite what might be happening with certain world leaders saying things to the UN about climate being a con, I think we're already underway. It's a question of how much that exponential and convergent growth actually happens.
Amen.
Amen. And I think AI is absolutely playing a role. So whilst it's hurting a bit, it's worth it. Is my quick answer. Mark, thank you so much. Great chat as always. You've been such a big supporter of Climate Salad. Just done multiple talks with us, spoken at our events, and been a really good guide for me in terms of seeing how AI plays a role in climate. So, mate, thanks so much for chatting.
Thank you. Always happy to help.